President Trump facing pushback from U.S. cattle producers after suggesting the United States should import beef from Argentina to bring down prices for American consumers. Joining us on the Ohio AgNet, Ethan Lane. He is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Ethan, great to see you as always.
Great to be with you.
Let's start from the beginning. Give us an explanation of President Trump's plan to buy beef from Argentina and what the goals behind this proposal might be.
Well, that's a great question. I think it's one that we're all still trying to find some answers to, but we know that the president is actively engaged in these trade negotiations right now. We've been very vocally supportive of the fact that this is a really important initiative to change some of the imbalances we've seen specifically in the U.S. cattle and beef supply chain over the years. Access to foreign markets being blocked by non-tariff barriers, bad behavior by our trading partners. This is an important area the president has gone into. This particular instance where we're seeing him make comments about, bringing the price of beef down for consumers. That on its own, if you take the countries out of the mix, is very concerning to an industry that is really rooted in the free market, right? We have worked as an industry for years to build beef demand to the point that even at these high prices, consumers are still showing up and choosing beef, right? They're changing the cuts that they buy, and we're watching those dynamics in the market. And certainly anyone watching the supply chain knows we're getting awfully close to that top end of what consumers are willing to pay. And at a certain point, they will buy less of our product. And that is how this should work. They buy less, the market signals get sent through the supply chain. Walmart and Five Guys and all these different groups lower the price of their products. Maybe your $15 double cheeseburger, at Five Guys is a $14.78 cheeseburger. And that sends those market signals down to the packers and to the feeders and to, cow calf and through the supply chain that, okay, we've got a little bit of a changing circumstance here. That isn't something the federal government should or can be involved in. Let the market work and send those signals so that we can get done what we need to get done. That's number one. When you add in the country we're actually talking about here, this is not a good trading partner. This is a country with a checkered history of FMD, of spotty animal disease controls in country. We have a massive trade imbalance on beef already with them, 801 million in shipments from Argentina in the last 5 years, compared to, I think, about 7 million in product from us going to them. That's, I think, why you're seeing the reaction you are so uniformly, which doesn't happen a lot, from cattle producers across the spectrum, across the country, that are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, this is exactly the opposite of what's on my red hat. This is exactly the opposite of what I was told we're doing here, right? We're instead, we're bringing in product to fix something that you're not going to fix by bringing in the product, and you're doing it over the objections of the producers who are telling you things aren't bad. We don't need help in the cattle supply chain right now. Other parts of agriculture are hurting. We're just getting well from COVID, and the best thing that they can do is stay out of the way and let that happen.
Let's break that down to the farm level. How would importing beef from Argentina, or any other country for that matter, impact U.S. beef producers, particularly those that are already facing some challenges due to the high cost of feed, other input prices, and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with the Argentine example in particular, you're talking about such a small footprint that I think the reality economically is it wouldn't impact producers economically. The economic impact is from the market fluctuations from the announcements, right? The market goes limit down, you have margin calls, you have people that can't buy LRP. That's where we're seeing the impact right now, is in the artificial impacts to the market each day, and what that means for producers that are trying to manage risk and navigate, when to sell cattle, when to market, when to do all those things. The actual impact of, let's say, just pulling numbers out of the air, an extra 20,000 metric tons of lean trimmings from Argentina isn't going to do a whole lot, right? I mean, there just isn't enough there to make an impact. Maybe it makes margins for the packers a little better right now, and it's very popular on social media to talk about the packers making all the money. Packers are in the red right now. And, one of our biggest concerns is watching a packer go down right now and what that would mean for the supply chain. You have these guys running 32-hour shifts instead of 40. They're not full, and they're looking for supplies. So, anything that you can do right now to help them is probably helpful to everybody. But even that, I don't think would be enough for there to be a real impact there. So the real economic impact, again, is those market impacts from the off-the-cuff comments. and what that does to the cattle markets and what that does for our producers that use products that are keyed off of those markets. That's where we're seeing the real concern and the ire right now about this, more so than the actual economic threat of that extra product, coming in an offhanded way into the supply chain.
Even before this new rhetoric, there was a lot of talk about food security, the impact of foreign beef imports on U.S. sovereignty. How do you see this plan, if it were to come to fruition, affecting long-term sustainability of domestic beef production?
Well, look, the strong demand for U.S. product from consumers is based on their taste for U.S. beef. There is quite literally nowhere else on planet Earth where you can go and supplement a supply of high quality US beef with something that meets that consumer expectation. And that's because nobody on planet Earth raises the high quality product that US cattle producers raise. So when we talk about imports, we always talk about the fact that this is not a flood of ribeyes, right? We're not going to be eating Argentine ribeye at Capitol Grill. This is about lean trimmings. This is about extending our ground beef supply, which is a big chunk of what we put out the door. And the fact is, we raise fat cattle in this country, and fat cattle don't produce 90-10 ground beef. And consumers want both of those things. They want a highly marbled ribeye, and they want lean ground beef. And so we bring in what we don't make enough of, and we ship out what we don't eat here, right? Tongues and offal, hearts and rounds and things that wouldn't go into that ground beef supply necessarily anyway, and do have markets overseas. So there's a symbiotic relationship there between what we need coming in and what we're getting rid of that we can't sell or would go to the dump otherwise. That's a system that has evolved because it pencils. As far as what might happen when these discussions ongoing with trade, Brazil is already way over their skis as far as their footprint in imports into the U.S. It has pushed other better trading partners out of that other country quota. The Japanese, for instance, they import a very small amount of that high quality A5 Wagyu into the marketplace. That's not really a competitor to anything, in the US supply chain, it makes people excited about the product. You're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 metric tons, but they buy $2 billion worth of our product, right? So if they're feeling like, gosh, our little tiny bit we want to get into the country can't get in because the Brazilians are locking up all the cold storage in January, that's having another impact on our good trading partners that are the end recipient of all that stuff we need to get out of the country and sell to a foreign market. So you can't look at any of these in a vacuum because we've got just so many moving parts at one time in the U.S. supply chain. And all of that has to function properly for that cow-calf producer to reliably expand their herd and feel confident that those prices are going to still be there 2 years from now when those cattle are ready to go to market, right? You retain heifers now. We're not the chicken industry. You don't have new chickens in 8 weeks, right? We need a little more time on the clock to get that stuff to market and meet that consumer expectation for the quality that they're used to. So it's just one of those things where we really need decision makers to understand that there's no silver bullet here. There's really not a role for the government to fix any kind of market. That was true when Vilsack was secretary. It's true now that Secretary Rollins is in place. But what they can do is focus on deregulating and getting the federal government out of the way so that producers can make the right economic decisions in this marketplace.
Are there other options? Are there options to keep American farmers at the forefront, cattle producers in particular, but still lower those beef prices? I know you say the markets kind of work in its own way, but we have cold storage. Are there things that we can do here in the U.S. to help both sides of the coin?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think that as we kind of move into this shutdown that's now going into a couple of weeks, you're going to start to have people missing paychecks here at the end of the month on the federal government side. Obviously, that's a couple million consumers across the country. We look at consumer confidence, we look at all those things. But quite frankly, you still have producers that are saying, even in this market, even with the prices that we're seeing, if you don't already have that inventory to sell, it's daunting, right? Capital is still extremely expensive. It doesn't pencil, just like it doesn't pencil in a lot of areas to buy a car still or buy a pickup or a new tractor. Same thing is true for producers. The cost of fuel is still a problem, cost of inputs across the board. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of this is building that layer of confidence for our producers that the market that they need to sell into is going to be there for them in the next couple of years as they sell those animals. So it really requires the federal government doing what they are tasked with doing across a range of these issues at once. So the producers can go back to raising beef and theoretically not spend 40 hours a week worried about what the government's doing.
What's your message to President Trump and his administration, and how do you get that message across to them?
The cattle producers across the country supported you. This industry has been supportive of this administration from day one. We have been supportive even when it has been difficult for us to shoulder that, because we knew that you're headed towards something that's going to be helpful for U.S. cattle producers. This is not helpful for U.S. cattle producers. We do not need the federal government meddling in the free market. It's not better because it's a Republican administration doing it. This is a free market industry. We have faith in that marketplace. Go back to that core issue set of deregulating and getting the federal government out of producers' lives, and you will have that support.
Ethan Lane, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I know you're awful busy, and I appreciate you taking time for us here today. Thank you.
Appreciate you having me.